We are here today with Kalle Lyytinen, Director of the Doctor of Management Programs at Case Western Reserve University, to talk about the introduction of a new journal focused on engaged scholarship research. Kalle, you're the editor-in-chief of a new journal called Engaged Management Review, or EMR. What's the aim of EMR?
There are currently two types of journals dedicated to the management scholarship. One of them are high theory, high evidence. We try to fill the gap which is between these journals, create a journal with compelling evidence, some theory, but oriented towards practice.
What is the engaged scholarship community, and why is it important for it to have its own voice?
Classically, or in tradition, management scholarship has been written by the academics, and they have focused on theory and developing theory by itself. Practitioner scholarship or engaged scholarship is focused on practical problems of the managers and trying to build evidence and also theory to address those problems in ways which leads to actionable knowledge, which can be used in practical situations to improve managers' life and work.
You seem to be focusing on problems of practice. Can you tell me who would be most interested in this kind of research?
Problems of practice emerge from the lived experience of managers or other organizational members, and there are things which need the long-term attention, are complex, and are typically multi-level and difficult to address. Those type of problems require sustained academic research to understand them and to address them. And these are the types of problems which we want to publish and which we want to address in the Journal of Engaged Management Scholarship. One aspect of this journal and the movement behind it is that there are currently about 35 academic management programs, doctoral programs, which start their research and the doctoral study with the focus on problems of practice. And we want to also serve this growing community of practitioner-scholars.
Can you tell us how engaged scholarship is different than traditional scholarly research?
In management research, the traditional model of academic research or scholarship is that you do a doctoral study based on a discipline, and you study a few years, read the literature, and then you find a theory and you run with it. In practitioner scholarship, as I pointed out, the focus is on problems of practice, and these have to emerge from the practical experience of the managers, and they have to focus on addressing those problems. The second aspect, which is many times also combined, is that the managers themselves become scholars. By attending these doctoral programs, they learn research methods, they learn the role of the evidence, and they learn theory, and they learn to apply those theories to the problems of practice they face.
Kalle, can you give us a specific example of engaged scholarship research?
Here's one example which I can pick up from the recent study which one of the students here at Case Weatherhead did on healthcare in healthcare context. She wanted to understand and explain why physicians or other types of healthcare professionals are poor leaders. So they have a double role. They have to be experts in certain domain, and then they have to be leaders. And that led to a much more detailed research question, which is that what makes a leader in this type of context effective? And after a little bit more broader inquiry and narrowing down different types of explanations for this question, she later on studied that what aspects of emotional intelligence predict the effectiveness of healthcare physicians in leading healthcare organizations. And that was a concrete study which came with concrete results which could help actually to generate new interventions into how to improve leadership effectiveness in the healthcare organizations.
This all sounds very interesting. Who is the audience for EMR?
There are three types of audiences in the order of importance, I guess. The first one is just practitioner scholars, or students, and especially students, alumni, and others who have been trained in these practitioner-oriented management programs. And there's a growing number of these people across the globe. The second group of people is what I would call enlightened managers. Managers who are interested in science and research-based studies of their own practices and interested in using evidence in making managerial decisions. And the journal is aimed to provide some snippets of that evidence. And the third audience is, of course, academics who participate in these programs, teach them in these programs, and also who are in general interested in having significant impact on practice. And there's a growing number of faculty in business schools who have that interest.
What kind of research does EMR seek to publish?
I think the key aspect of the types of articles which we want to publish is that they have to address a problem of practice. So they have to be anchored in some practical perspective of being relevant for a concrete situation and offering some type of insight into that, how to address that situation. And this can be addressed in multiple ways. The first one is that people can develop and publish or write articles where they provide new evidence for new types of research problems or problems of practice. And that's the idea of evidence giving in this practitioner-based scholarship. Secondly, people can tell stories or write articles about how they have been able to use research findings in concrete settings, or what prevented them from using research findings in concrete settings. So the question is that how can we make the translation from the produced scientific research into practice much more effective? And the third types of articles which we publish are, which I would call theory-based insights into practitioner scholarship, and which may come in multiple forms. Typical examples are what types of new theories you can actually use to understand problems of practice or practical situations, which can enlighten you to understand the situation. Secondly, we are also willing to publish articles which demonstrate how different types of theories can be used in specific settings or across the settings in addressing certain types of problems of practice. And thirdly, we will publish articles which discuss, I would say, the methods and the approaches of improving engaged scholarship in general. So it covers methodology, all aspects of practice and so forth.
Can you talk a little bit about the article submission and review process?
EMR is an electronic journal, which means that we have established a website in which you can go and submit the article. The articles are double-blind reviewed, as is quite common in management journals, and we have an editorial board which takes care of the review process. A unique part of the reviewing process here is that we have both academics and practitioners. In this case, alumni or practitioner-scholars reviewing together jointly each article to add both the rigor and theory and the relevance at the same time into the review process. The review process is expected to take about 3 months. We want very short cycle times.
And how can readers find the journal?
Well, we have tried to have a largest possible impact with this journal. So we have made it open access published journal. So anybody can go to the website and download the articles.
This is great. So what's been the reception for EMR so far?
The reception has been very excited and overwhelming. We have established in a relatively short period an outstanding editorial board, which has representatives from multiple universities across the globe and some of the leading scholars in what I could call practitioner-oriented academic scholarship in management field. We have also a large number of active participation from former alumni from different doctoral programs, especially from the CASE program. And we see it as a next step in moving this community and the movement forward, which actually started here at CASE about 20 years ago when we started the first practitioner-oriented management doctoral program in the world. So we expect great things about these journals and hope that it will cement the current understanding what this field is and grow it forward. And we see that this as a very valuable vehicle to do it.
Thank you very much, Kalle, for sharing with us the latest developments of EMR. Just one last thing before we finish. If someone wants to submit an article, where should they go?
Well, it's relatively simple. We have a mnemonic name, EMR. So it's emr.case, which is the name of the university where we're at, .edu. And that website includes all the practical guidelines and information about how to submit an article and what is the publication process, and additional information about the editorial board and some other things which the readers might want to know.